Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chilling Nights, where we narrate scary and chilling stories. On this week's video, we have a very creepy story titled A Skinwalker Summer. And before we begin, I want to thank everyone for tuning into this week's episode. And if you like the content, like the stories, make sure you like and subscribe. So without further ado, let's get right into the story. A Skinwalker Summer. This story is from my misspent childhood when I am well and truly a nerdy kid and relates to the house I grew up in. For some background, before I was born, there was a systematic program that destroyed Native American culture and ripped off the United States government while doing so. It also victimized many of those it was intended to serve. I speak now of the American Indian training schools or boarding schools set up by various churches and government entities in the United States during the 19th and first half of the 20th century. The goal was both assimilation and elimination. Teach the Native Americans housed in the school how to be good Christians and Americans with useful skills and abilities with English, but at the same time suppress their own languages, religion, and culture, and get paid by the state to do it. Now, don't get me wrong, there was some good that came out of the system. There were job opportunities that became available to graduates they would never have otherwise had, but the cost to benefit was ultimately not worth it. Many participants were victimized in every way that a child can be victimized. In my own ever be humble opinion, the best thing to come out of this program was the rejection of forced assimilation and the resurgence of interest in traditional languages, cultures, and religions. But like I said, this was before I was born. During my life, there was a weak continuation of the program in many areas in the country. Some churches continued to propagate a Christianizing of Native Americans by offering their children placement in good Christian homes during the school year where they could get a white man's education. Yes, that's the term they used, and learn English as well as being taught proper religion. This program has now been largely discontinued. Current efforts are to build up the educational opportunities available on the reservations to where a proper education is available to all. I have personally volunteered time and money to such enterprises and will continue to do so. The early years. In my early years growing up, my two older sisters often complained about seeing things in the house that freaked them out, that none of the rest of us saw. I personally thought it was all in their heads because whenever I would come in the room, they claimed it would stop. I never saw anything. I won't venture to describe much what they did. That's their story to tell if they ever cared to. Let's just say that there were frequent mentions of floating eyes and disembodied heads and faces. Again, I never saw any of this, but I did end up spending many nights vigil on the floor of one of the rooms as a preventative. I honestly suspected that it related to a confirmed peeping Tom issue we had in the neighborhood that seemed to be aimed at the little girls on our street. This detail frames our initial responses to the event this post describes, as well as some of the aftermath. The setup. When my older sister Lila is 12 years old, she makes a friend at school. Lily is from the Navajo National Reservation in the Four Corners area where Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona all touch. It is the only place in the United States where all four states come together, and a bit of a tourist trap moneymaker for the Navajo Nation who owns the piece of land where it happens. I visited it once. It is pretty cool to get your picture taken with each foot and hand in a different state. Worth the cost to visit at least once in your life. And believe me, the money goes to good ends. Lily is living with a good Christian family for the school year, and she and Lila really hit it off. In previous posts on other subreddits, I've described how my mother, Canary, was a Christian missionary to Japan, who ended up doing research and writing books in both English and Japanese that were more particularly Christian in nature. We were raised with Japanese actively spoken in our home, and at our gatherings and activities outside our home. Many of my parents' friends were Japanese. We were taught to respect the language, religion, and culture of others, period. Didn't matter which ones. And so Lily learns better English, Lila learns some Navajo, as Lily and Lila share religious experiences in a Christian context. Lila learns from Lily the ways of her religion, and it is mutually enriching. But then the school year draws to an end, and Lily is to return home a few states away. Lila is distraught. Canary opens discussion with Lily's mother, and it is decided that Lila will go home with Lily, since there is room on the bus taking many young Navajos back home. They will return together in the fall when the new school year starts. And so begins a pattern that will continue for much of Lila's remaining years of grade school. Lily never lives with us. We are not considered a suitable host family for a number of reasons, but she always returns to the same family, so she remains in the same school. Lila spends her summers on the reservation, and boy, she comes back home tanned. But even with a natural darkening of the skin, her blonde hair, made blonder by the same exposure of the sun, and blue eyes are impossible to hide. She is not of the dine, the trigger. When Lila is 17, she is helping Lily's family at a roadside stand where they sell much of their jewelry. Lily's family is famous for silver and turquoise jewelry. What they don't sell to trading posts, they sell directly along the roadside. Something Lily made very clear from the beginning is that Lila would not be learning anything about making jewelry. Family secrets are family secrets, and even other Navajo families would like to learn her family's techniques. That is a multi-generational nope. But Lila can help the family sell their wares. On this day, things do not go well. They make some good sales. That's not the issue. They have a visit from a person to whom the family pays great deference. Lila has never seen them so respectful with anyone before. The visitor speaks no English, but is clearly very unhappy about the presence of my sister with the family. Her aspect is angry and indignant. While Lila barely understands what she says, the gist is understood. When the visitor has left, Lily's mother tells Lila, "Tomorrow you go home. I cannot protect you from this." And so Lila returns home a month early by Greyhound. She gives no explanation. It will be years until I get the full story I am sharing here. The consequences. About a week after Lila returns home, something starts to happen. To understand this part of the story, you need to understand a bit of the layout of our neighborhood. Our house is on a 3/4 acre lot and at the end of a circle with a farm on one side and a small river running behind it. At this time, the other side of the river is mostly fields and horse pastures. There are animals we normally see here. We have about 100 cats living in and around our property. We have dogs, we have frogs and muskrats and other creatures that need the river to live. We have snakes and any kind of insects you can imagine. We are too far into the populated areas to ever see any large predators. No mountain lions, no coyotes, no wolves, no bears, no foxes, not even very many raccoons. There are cows and horses in the neighborhood, and a rooster crow will wake us most mornings. This night, I'm awakened from a deep sleep by Lila. We all gather into the highest room in the house, the room where Lila sleeps when she is home. There is a howling in the breeze coming from somewhere beyond the river. I'm not clever enough to know the difference between a wolf and a coyote house, but it's definitely along those lines. I've heard this song before when on a survival camp in the desert. It came clear and crisp on the wind and woke me then. It was cold at night in the desert. The fire was out, but the houses were far away, so no worries. Then a response came from the other side of us, and it was much too close for comfort. I did not sleep again that night. And now something like that song is being sung here in town, where it has no business being, and it is getting closer. At my oldest sister's instruction, we all joined in prayer together. After that, I don't recall much more than that night. I woke up in the morning on the floor in my sister's room. When asking about last night, no one would talk about it. I have a million questions, but will get no answers. And then night comes again. This time we are all gathered in my sister's room, and the sleeping bags are brought up. We pray together, and I eventually drift off to the wonderful land of Nod, only to be awakened by howling again, only much closer. I drift in and out of sleep. In the morning there are scratch marks on the back door, only they are too high for a normal canine to have made, and they are deep and powerful. The medicine woman. This day, Lila is able to get Lily on the phone. After they talk, my oldest sister drives Lila somewhere. But again, no one is telling me anything. I will later learn that Lily gave Lila the name of a medicine woman near us. Name and address, no phone number. Lily told her to tell the medicine woman what had happened on the reservation and that a dogman had been sent. In the evening, Canary brings a priest to bless the house and each of us. After he leaves, my sisters bring in a short old Navajo woman with a deep smile and a great deal of silver and turquoise literally from head to foot. She wears a short round hat and has her hair in two long gray braids down both sides of her face. They go to at least her knees and have a lot of silver and turquoise woven in as well. She has 3 bundles of smudge. One is definitely white sage, but I have no idea what the other 2 are. She smudges the house and each of us. She uses each of the bundles for different things. She chants, sings in Navajo the whole time. My sisters go into my mom's room with her, and you can hear talking and more singing. I am not allowed to see, and it is never spoken of again. We again huddle in my sister's room that night. We pray together and sing church's song together. The old Navajo woman sits in a chair in the hall besides the back door and watches and listens, and hums to herself. When the howling starts, she gets up and walks outside. Tonight the howling stays distant. It never approaches. In the morning, the old woman smiles at me kindly. She says, 3 more. Lila explains that we need to do it all again for 3 more nights. And we do. Smudge and chant and songs and prayer. The howling seems further each night. The last night, it is not heard at all. Howling of the kind will never be heard again in my neighborhood. In the morning, Lila makes a gift to the old woman of some beautiful pieces of jewelry that Lily and her family had given her over the years. They are accepted graciously. She smiles deeply at me as she leaves. I will never see her again, but I can never forget her deep, pure smile. She was a force for good in the world. Later, when in later years, as I learned that the rest of the story described above, I asked Lila to explain Dogman to me. She just smiles and says that talking about it will invite it, and that is not an invitation she is making. She will speak no further about it. Lila and Lily continue to be as close as any sisters, but Lily will never allow Lila to return to live with her on the reservation again. She says it's too dangerous. Lily does eventually live with us. She lives rent-free while going to college. For all intent and purposes, she is my sister. I ask her once about this event. She smiles and shies with me. The one phrase that I hear most often from her, "You talk too much." She then tells me that this is not for me, and that it is all I will ever get from her on the matter. From what I have been able to gather from hearing my sister speak on the matter twice more over the years, and just picking up things here or there, it seems that no matter where my sister went, this dogman would have found her, and it would have not ended well. The medicine woman helped us by misdirecting it and sending it to an impossible trail to follow and keep it busy until this assignment was replaced by a new one. I could be wrong about this, but that's not what it sounded like to me. I have, of course, since heard of skinwalkers and now realized this is the modern term for what Lily called a dogman back in the day. It was not a term any of us had heard of when these events happened. I never saw it. I was never told too much about it. I'm not a source of any useful information on the topic. I can only relate what happened one summer, many decades ago, when my sister returned home unexpectedly early from the reservation. The aftermath. In the years after this event, my older sisters would move out and on with their lives. During the winter following these events, I start to wake up in my room from time to time to find a floating face of a beautiful woman over me. As gorgeous as she is terrifying, and in a flash it's gone. This only ever happened in the lower part of the house. In the highest part of the house next to my sister's room, where we were gathered in those tense nights in August, there is a large family room. After these events, every time I take a nap on the sofa in that room, the sleep is fitful and disturbed. I have no history of sleep paralysis at this time, but now experiencing something like it, I wake up unable to move or speak, fight myself upright only to find I am dreaming, and now awake unable to move or speak, and the cycle would continue. As I am drifting off to sleep on the sofa, I will sometimes feel a weight on top of me. It often feels like it falls through me. I feel like I am out of sync with my body and either floating over it or falling through it again and again and again. It's like a dream of falling and not falling at the same time. At the same time, on the edges of sleep, I hear a cacophony of voices chanting some indecipherable something that sounds like a backmask clip of the Beatles. It is maybe 10 seconds long, then it stops and a few minutes later starts again. Sometimes in one ear, sometimes the other, sometimes both, but not in sync. This also happens a few times in the lower part of the house. I dread falling asleep on that sofa, and yet I seem to irresistibly drop off on it quite frequently. Nowhere else in the house do I experience this combination of odd dreams and sensations. I do not know if it all relates to the events of that summer. I only know that it never happened before. It never stopped happening after for as long as I lived in the house. Perhaps this event opened up a part of me that was previously oblivious and blind to such things. Perhaps that upstairs retained some of the protection that the medicine woman had placed there. I am not a clever man. I have no idea. I can only relate what I experienced. And that is the end of the story. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If any one of you want me to narrate a story, just make sure to send it down to that Gmail in the description. And like always, if you guys enjoyed the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Until next time.